And then the other thing that I just wanted to touch on real quick was power struggles. So a couple people said, like, what's like diffusing upset kids? And I said, we're going to get to that later, but I'll just give you my quick tease for that. The easiest way to diffuse an upset child or person, forget kid, human, right, is to just simply agree with them. Just agree with them. Mr. Mendler, what? I hate you. Makes sense. Why does that make sense? Because there's days I don't like myself, which means I'm sure there's days other people don't like me. Or Mr. Mendler, what? You're so stupid. Obviously, buddy. Obviously. I mean, I picked this profession, did I not? For what, 40 grand a year to be yelled at by you all day about how stupid I am? Tell me I'm stupid, because I'm not sure I knew that on my own, right? 90-mile-an-hour fastball is coming in baseball from the pitcher to the catcher. There is one way, and one way only, to diffuse that fastball. Sorry. What's that way? 90-mile-an-hour fastball, pitcher to the catcher. One way to diffuse it. What's that way? Here it comes, 90 miles an hour. Catch it. Set it down. Here it comes, 90 miles an hour. Catch it. I mean, sometimes when it's coming 90, it hurts your hand, doesn't it? A little, right? It might even knock you back a little bit. But you don't tell the pitcher not to throw so hard. As the catcher, you get in better position. You hold your glove out. You concentrate more. You hit the webbing when it comes in instead of the heel, right? Put yourself in a better spot. Catch it, set it down. Best story I have for this. I was working in a place called, have you all ever heard of this place? Called McAllen, Texas. Anyone ever heard of or been to McAllen, Texas? So McAllen, Texas is literally on the Mexico border. Like, you come out of the airport, you turn left, you're in Mexico, you turn right, you're in Texas. Anyway, I was working with the school down there, and this little old lady teacher came up to me. She was like this tall, she had bright white hair, and she looks at me and she goes, I had just talked about this concept, and she comes up to me and she goes, I think I caught it one time, but I want to know what you think. So I said, okay, great, what happened? She said, I'm going to tell you what happened, but before I tell you what happened, I have to warn you. I said, warn me what? She said, what this kid said to me is the worst thing you've ever heard a kid say to their teacher in your whole life. I guarantee you've never heard anything worse. I said, great, what'd he say? She said, I can't say it, it's too bad. I said, yeah, but how am I supposed to know if you don't say it? She said, right, good point. Okay, I'm going to say it, but it's not me saying it, it's my student. I said, lady, I gotcha. By the way, just to be clear with everybody in this room, it's not me saying it, it's her student in Texas saying it. So I said, what happened? She said, all I did is ask him to take out his books. Is that so bad? And I said, I don't know. Did you say please? Did you say thank you? She goes, I asked him fine. And I said, what happened? She said, he turned around and he looked at me and he said, quote, I ain't taken out my books, you gonorrhea, syphilis dripping whore. I told you it was bad. I'm glad some of you have a sense of humor. It is. It's good to see. It's good to see. It's good to see. So you got to understand from my vantage point right now, like, I just said that, and like half the room erupted in laughter, and the other half of the room was like this. Right? I know, right? That's bad. That is bad. That's legit bad. Like, that one got my attention. I have to tell you that typically, like, when I go to schools and stuff, I'm like a magnet for difficult kid stories. Like, people tell me that like to tell me they're difficult. And usually I listen, but I don't know, Usually they all end like the same way, with a middle finger or an F-bomb, right? That one I was like, a sixth grader? She's like, yeah, can you believe? I said, yeah, that's bad, right? So she looks at me and she goes, want to know what I said back to him? And I said, I don't know. I don't know. Do I? She goes, oh, you do. So I say, great, what'd you say back? And she looks at me, she goes, no way, not that easy. I said, what do you mean, no way, not that easy? She looks at me, she goes, well, you've been Mr. Roleplay Man all day, let's roleplay it. I said, you want to roleplay it with me? She said, correct. She said, you're going to be the kid and I'm going to be the teacher. I said, you want me to be the kid? She said, yeah, you've been being the kid anyway. You be the kid and I'll be the teacher. So I wasn't thinking, right? Because it was the end of the day. I was tired, right? Day was almost over. So she looks at me and she goes, sit down, right? She tells me to sit down. So I did, right? So I sit down. So she looks at me and I look at her. And she looks at me and I look at her. And she looks at me, she goes, go ahead. I said, go ahead what? She says, call me those things. No. I said, lady, no. I said, listen, I was living in Rochester at the time. I said, lady, listen, I said, I live in New York, but we hear stories about Texas. Y'all kill people down here for way less than that, right? Like, don't they? Right? They got, I don't know, that's what I heard. They got people in Texas on death row for breathing wrong. I'm not calling anybody anything down there, right? And then she looked at me in the God-given voice that only certain teachers have. So you know how there's the God-given teacher voice and the God-given teacher look? Like some teachers can look at a kid a certain way, and the kid's like, I gotta sit down. And everyone else is like, why? And the kid's like, I don't know. But when that lady looks at me like that, it just means I have to sit down, right? So there's the teacher look and the teacher voice. I didn't get either. Her name in Texas was Pat. She got the voice. And she looked me right in the eyes and she said, I said, call me those names now. You know that voice? Now look, y'all heard my story a little bit this morning. From the time I was a little kid, I've had a significant mean streak inside of me that I have worked I'm not kidding. I've worked really hard in my life at putting away, right? Like I'm talking about counseling and therapy and addiction, talking about counseling and therapy and addiction recovery. But when you want it to come out, like you're demanding that it comes out, guess what? No problem. So I looked at her and I said, fine, I ain't taking out my books, you gonorrhea, syphilis, dripping whore bag. I threw bag on the end. Just to leave no doubt that I'm worse than any kid she ever had. So she looks at me and she goes, you want to know what I said back to him? I said, I do. She goes, are you sure? I said, I do. She goes, I walked right up to that boy and I got right in his face and I looked him right in the eyes and I said, and it is exactly for all of those reasons that I am not in a very good mood today. So take out your books and let's go now. Y'all, she was legitimately crazy. She was. She's crazy. Because then she looked at me and she goes, and seriously, Brian, I have a question. How do you even get those things? And if I had those things, would I still be alive? I'm like, enough! Enough, lady. You're like 90. I don't even think you're getting anything right now. Oh. So I said, what happened? She said, he looked like he had been run over by a truck. She said, he just kind of stood there. And she looks at me and she goes, and the whole class erupted in laughter. And she looks at me, she goes, yeah, but here's the good news. For the first time all year, they laughed at something that I said instead of something that he said. And then she pointed at me and she goes, and I don't care what you say. It felt so good. I was like, God bless you, lady. God bless. Look, I'm not saying it's easy to go where she went, right? I'm not saying it's easy to go there. But if the goal is truly to diffuse, now I'm not saying not to talk to that kid later, not to deal with it later. Talk to the kid later, deal with it later. What happened with the light? That's been happening all day, right? The clapper, remember the clapper? That was great, I know. That's crazy, right? Look, I'm not saying not to talk to the kid later and deal with the kid later, but listen, this is really important. When you talk to a kid later and deal with the kid later, always communicate with the kid through the foundation of trying to get to know them better versus the foundation of trying to get something from them. I'm going to say that again, right? Oftentimes when we communicate with kids in school, so especially the most challenging ones, we're communicating from the foundation of trying to get something, put your stuff away, take out your books, stop talking, knock it off. How many more times do you need to be told, right? Trying to get something from you. Instead, communicate from the foundation of trying to get to know you better, trying to understand who you are better as a person. I'll give you an example of this. So the other question I got up here earlier was about oppositional kids, right? Oppositional defiant kids, like how do you handle them? And my response about that was simply just use questions instead of statements, right? And so think about it like this. For oppositional defiant kids in general, statements are their fuel, questions are their kryptonite. They don't like questions because questions can't be argued. Statements can. I said sit down. No. Yes. No, yes, no, yes. Boom, you're in a power struggle. Versus, hey, come here. I was just curious. Can you please explain to me why you think it's okay to stand instead of sit right now? What's happening at home that you feel the need to get up constantly? Is something going on with you? Is something happening? You want to tell me a little bit more about that? Or this is one I hear in school all the time. Ready? We don't talk to adults like that. Psst, I'll talk to you however I want. No, you won't. Yes, I will. No, you won't. Yes, I won't. Boom, you're in a power struggle. Instead of that, it becomes this. Hey, come here, come here, come here. I was just curious, and you don't have to tell me if you don't want, but if you don't mind telling me, could you please explain to me where in your life you've learned to talk to adults like that? Like, I was just wondering, who talks to you that way? Where you think that's an okay way to talk to me? Because I know that's not you talking in there. 8-year-old people don't talk like that. Who is talking in there? You want to tell me a little bit about more where it's coming from? Notice how I'm communicating with you, foundation, trying to get to know you better, versus foundation, trying to get something from you. And typically when we communicate, trying to get to know better, all of a sudden, right, kids start to open up. If you want to practice the questions over statements, pick one day of your life. I don't care what the day is, it doesn't matter. And here's the thing to practice. From the minute you wake up in the morning until the minute you go to bed at night. No matter what anyone does, no matter what anyone says, for one full day, you're only allowed to use questions and see what happens. Mr. Mendler, what? What's the homework going to be? I don't know. What do you all think it should be? You all think it should be 10 problems? 15 problems? Here's an idea I had. How about I give you 20 problems and you pick whichever 5 you want? What do you think about that? Mr. Mendler, what? What's the consequence going to be if we break that rule? Oh my gosh, that's such a good question. And actually, I'm not actually really sure. I mean, what's it going to take to get you to stop calling people names? I mean, you and I both know the first 5 things I've tried this year haven't worked. Do you have any ideas for me? Honey, what? Where would you like to go for dinner tonight? Good question. Where would you like to go? I learned that's a good one for marriage. Right? But notice how by using a question, I disarm the argument, right? You had your weapon, I just grabbed it from you and put it over here, right? And that's sort of, I'm not saying, again, it's easy to do that, but if I change me, I change everything around me. Staying with that theme, right? Instead of trying to make the oppositional kid more agreeable, change how you respond to the oppositional kid and see if that changes them in the process.